All right, guys, I want to thank you for joining our first ever commentary only video, and this is in response to today's U.S. Department of Transportation press conference in regards to UAS registration. And now I want to warn you, the video has been edited down. I did cut out 3 segments, and those were just statements from the AOPA, the AMA, and AUVSI, who basically all just read pre-scripted yada yada yada, yeah, we want safe skies, blah blah blah. Yeah, we already know that. So I'm just going to put in there the Secretary's remarks, as well as FAA Administrator Michael Hirta's comments, and then we're going to do a little QA at the end, and I'm going to comment on some of the things that were said throughout the video.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you, and I want to begin by acknowledging our FAA Administrator, Michael Huerta, who is here with me this afternoon for this announcement.
Wow,
I also
lots of
want to
people on
thank
stage
the organization
today.
standing here with us, demonstrating their shared commitment to improve the safe use of unmanned aircraft in the United States. We have with us the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, the Academy of Model Aeronautics, the Airline Pilots Association International, the American Association of Airport Executives, the Helicopter Association International, Precision Hawk, and AirMap. The United States Department of Transportation is bullish about technology and transportation. The rate of change driven by technology in other sectors in our lives has now reached the transportation sector, and it requires this agency to be agile enough to adapt and integrate innovation into our national transportation system. Whether we're talking about driverless cars, register it and operate it safely to protect the public. The details of this new registration system will be developed by a task force consisting of government, leaders, and a diverse group of stakeholders who will work on a tight deadline to get this work done. First, registration will reinforce the need for unmanned aircraft users, including consumers and hobbyists, to operate their drones safely. It's really hard to follow rules if you don't know what the rules are, or that the rules apply to you. And so registration gives operators the opportunity to learn the airspace rules before they fly and enjoy their devices safely. Second, registration will help us enforce the rules against those who operate unsafely by allowing the FAA to identify the operators of unmanned aircraft. We can take enforcement action as necessary to protect the airspace for everyone. If unmanned aircraft operators break the rules, clearly there should be consequences. But in fact, there can be no accountability if a person breaking the rules can't be identified. Registration will now allow us to identify them. We've done a lot with education and with outreach to inform new users of the airspace, and we'll continue to do that outreach. For example, we've partnered with members of industry and the modeling community to initiate Know Before You Fly outreach campaigns, providing recreational operators with the information they need to fly safely and responsibly. Several unmanned aircraft manufacturers now voluntarily include educational materials in their packaging, and we thank them for that. The San Francisco 49ers football team even partnered with us to record a short commercial to discourage people from flying drones over their stadium.
Because nothing says professional drone operator like a 300-pound football player.
On a similar campaign to spread the message that flying around airports and runways is unsafe and will result in stiff penalties and fines.
If we don't want them flying at airports, how about we crack down on selling them at airports?
Drone Zone campaign. The FAA is currently beta testing an app that helps unmanned aircraft operators determine whether there are any restrictions or requirements in effect where they want to fly.
Nope, can't fly here.
What we're taking today has an added benefit as an additional educational tool. People registering their drones will be exposed to the rules and the reasons for those rules, and we believe this will help reduce some of the incidents I described earlier.
So when you're busy checking out at Best Buy during the busy holiday season, the checkout cashier will be busy going over all of this with you.
Safety that is generally ubiquitous among those responsible model aircraft users and users of the national airspace. And now I want to state the obvious point here. There's still a lot of work to do. This is not the whole solution. This is just a part of it, and the task force will be charged with answering a number of critical questions. But clarifying that federal law requires the registration of all aircraft, including unmanned aircraft, is essential to ensuring accountability and is an important part of our ongoing vigilance on this issue. This is a positive step forward for safety in our skies. By taking this measure, we will create a streamlined registration process for all small drone users and will continue to protect and encourage innovation in our airspace. I also want to assure you that the FAA's ongoing work to quickly and efficiently integrate unmanned aircraft in the national airspace will continue and will not be slowed down by this effort. Earlier this year, we took an important step by releasing a proposed rule. This laid out a flexible framework for allowing the routine commercial use of small unmanned aircraft. The FAA received more than 4,500 public comments on the proposal and is working to address those comments so the rule can be finalized by June of 2016. We're accommodating requests for some commercial operations under our Section 333 exemption process, and to date I have signed off on roughly 2,000 exemptions that allow unmanned aircraft to be used for a variety of purposes. So the registration requirement that we're announcing today will not delay any of this ongoing work, especially the completion of our small UAS rule. And with that, I want to conclude by thanking all of our stakeholders for their continued input to ensure the successful integration of unmanned aircraft technology and their unflagging commitment to safety. And now I want to invite one of our guests up here, Brian Wynn of the Association of Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. Brian, welcome. There you go. Thank you. And now Administrator Huerta and I will be happy to answer questions. Yeah, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Could you give us some sense of your timeline here? There's been some discussion. You would like to see these rules in place as soon as the Christmas season, but that would kind of sideline or find a way around the regular rulemaking process. So to do that, are you declaring some sort of an emergency condition that allows you to move that rapidly? And can I also ask you quickly, will this technology have any sort of, are you proposing ultimately any kind of a geofencing capability associated with the new regs?
Geofencing isn't the subject of this registration effort, but we do intend to move very quickly. And it is my hope that the task force will complete its recommendations in the middle part of November with the goal of having some rules in place by the middle part of December.
Does that mean
And the rush to get this done by Christmas, does that have anything to do with charging people to register their drones, to cash in on that 1 million drones that are planning on being sold this Christmas?
Move as quickly as we possibly can. Yeah.
Secretary, how do you plan to enforce this, particularly with people who already own drones? What's their incentive to register them?
One of the things that this task force will look at is what sorts of provisions should be made for people who already own drones, and that's a recommendation that will be forthcoming from the task force on how to deal with that. But we would expect retroactive registration. There may be a grace period. This task force will have to come up with those solutions.
But how are you going to enforce that? Are you going to send the drone police after people?
Well, look, the reality is that the signal we're sending today is that when you enter the national airspace, it's a very serious matter. This isn't riding your ATV on your own property. This is actually going into the space where other users are also occupying that space. And it is a matter of responsibility that we will take seriously. And again, there are penalties that are associated with failure to do so. Yes?
Given the were just cited. How do you really see this as holding people accountable or being able to make a big dent in any of these incidents that have happened?
Well, finding the drone has not been as much of a problem as finding the person who was using the drone. And the registration is designed to close that loophole. Yeah.
Again, registering a drone will do nothing to catch the drone operator if you don't catch the drone. If you look at all the cases that were in the news, you could probably count on one hand how many actually caught the actual drone, being that it actually crashed, like the White House. What was the other one? I mean, I can't even think of the other one. There's been a few sightings. Even the firefighting out west, they didn't catch anybody. It was just a report that somebody saw a drone. So how would registration keep that from keep anything from happening?
So let's start with the first question. In terms of registration, I think the intent here is to create as user-friendly a portal as possible. And again, the task force is going to have to wrestle with some of the questions about how much information to ask from consumers. But clearly identifiable information that helps us point back to the user is going to be critical. Your next question about, I just sort of blanked on your next question, so.
Well, do you believe that it's possible to actually make sure that every single drone that's sold, whether it's online, whether it's in a brick and mortar store, that it is actually registered? How will you make sure that a bad guy, for example, with malicious intent does not skirt the registration system?
Yeah. Well, so I think we have to compare the before and after. Today, there is no requirement for individual consumers like you and me to register. And so we are now moving towards a registration requirement. I think many, if not most, users will comply because of the attention that we are giving to this issue. But as I said in the previous question, that there are penalties associated with using these devices in the national airspace without complying with the registration requirement.
Mr. Secretary, to use the term drone police, there really are no drone police. The administrator has some civil authority, but if you want to take criminal activity, it's up to local and state authorities. There's all this talk about enforcement, but can you truly enforce somebody who is violating the national airspace?
Well, look, right now, if we have to go through a lot of steps to be able to identify who, in fact, was using a drone. This effort to register will give us the information we need to trace back to the user. That's an important piece of information to help us, and there are actual federal penalties associated with violating the requirement that we will be imposing.
But who in the federal government is going to go after those individuals?
Well, look, I think our typical process is for the Justice Department to prosecute these actions. But again, when you can't identify who, in fact, was using the drone, it makes it very difficult. That's what this registration requirement is designed to fix. And Michael, I don't know if you want to jump in here.
I think the only thing that I would add, David, is this is a partnership that we do with local law enforcement. And the important thing that we're doing today is establishing what the rules are. And the rules are, we're expecting you to be registered if you operate within the national airspace system. With that clarification, which is an authority that we currently have, then that creates a template if you are not operating within with that proper registration. That provides a basis for us to go after you and with our other law enforcement partners. It's a partnership of the FAA, which sets the regulatory framework, working with our law enforcement partners.
Yes.
Hi. Correct me if I'm wrong, I could be wrong, but I thought MAP 21 said that FAA wasn't supposed to regulate these hobbyists that are using drones. And so I'm wondering if you have the legal authority here to require this registration, since a lot of the people who are buying these drones, many of them are members of the Academy, but many are not, are just hobbyists.
So we're not requiring licensure of the operators. They're not required to get a license to operate them. In that sense, MAP 21 did have, not MAP 21, the last FAA reauthorization did exclude hobbyists. But when it comes to registration, this is a safety authority the FAA has, and it's one that we're exercising. Yes?
Are you working with any manufacturers of drones on this? And secondly, how often will the task force meet, and when will their recommendations be made public?
So we've actually been having lots of conversations with manufacturers of drones. As I mentioned before, some of them have actually included some of the educational information that we think is very important for consumers to know in the packaging of the devices. And so those conversations will continue. I'm hopeful that we'll have some who will actually be part of the task force. Michael, you can talk a little bit about process around the task force.
Yes, the Secretary has asked for the task force to complete its work by November 20th. And so they'll meet as often as they need to, and there is a set of questions that we want to work through relating to how we draw the line, how we simplify the process, how we make it as easy for people to do as we possibly can. And then we will take that and implement it, and obviously the goal is to get that in place as quickly as possible.
Yes.
So there was an interesting case study this past summer with an 18-year-old Connecticut student who had a drone that had a semi-automatic gun shooting on his property. So I'm wondering how and the Connecticut feds could take no action because there was no FAA regulation regarding this. So I'm wondering how the task force is going to be considering gun control, gun safety when dealing with drone
It's
registration.
illegal to drop anything from an aircraft operating in the national airspace system, and but this whole range of issues.
I like how he
about
doesn't
making
answer
sure
her
safe
question, but to
operation
answer her question,
is
it's
what we're
actually
trying to
not
get at.
illegal to drop
Registration
things
is
from
a
an
very
aircraft.
important point on
You can
that.
do so as long as you're aware of your surroundings and you know what's below and you're not going to endanger anybody below you.
to drop anything or shoot anything from any aircraft operating in the national airspace system.
And I will add that this task force that we're setting up today is the registration task force. There's a wider sweep task force. The ARC is also working on these issues as well. Last question.
Follow up about the numbers of close calls that you mentioned. You said that pilots have reported double the number of last year. Mr. Huerta, the numbers seem a little bit confusing and have been confusing for a few months. Can you set the record?
Again, here we go with the close call reports. Again, close calls and sightings, two different things. Have there maybe been 700 sightings? Sure. There are airports,
We are certainly
RC
seeing a
airports that are actually
significant
located
increase in
at airports.
reports.
So it's very
You know,
possible for a
clearly,
pilot to be coming
this
in on
is an
final
industry that
approach
is taking
and
off,
look out his
and
window
there is
and
a
look
lot of
over and
activity
see a
taking place in the
drone
national
flying
airspace
around
system.
300 or
And that's
400
what
feet
concerns
below
us.
him
The
and say that was a
educational
sighting. Was that a
component,
near
Secretary
miss?
talked about
No.
is
Was it a
part of
danger to
that.
anybody?
The
Absolutely
enforcement
not.
activities
So we need to really
that we go,
clarify, are
that's an
these
important part of
sightings,
it.
close calls,
But
near misses?
registration provides
Because
us
that
an opportunity to
740-something
tie
number is not
aircraft
really holding
with
water.
the operator, which is another tool in the toolbox going forward. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is also use this as an opportunity to educate new users of unmanned aircraft, of how to operate in the national airspace system. This is all part of a whole set of things that we're doing as we work to integrate this technology into our system.
Do you envision with this registration that there's a way to detect the drone? Or are you going to have to recover an errant drone in order to trace it back to the user? Is there going to be a transponder of some kind? Otherwise, I don't understand how it helps in the bulk of the reports.
Look, this is about having a national registry of folks who are owners of drones and users of drones. And as I've said before, our challenge so far has not been identifying the drone itself. It's been connecting it back to the person who is using it, and this will help us deal with that effectively. This is not about transponders or geofencing. This is about the connection.
Just if you don't understand.
Well,
Pilot reports a drone flying near JFK, and you're able to trace it back to the user. How?
well, we identify the drone. We collect the information on the drone, and the drone is cross-checked against the National Registry.
Getting the drone, or will you be able to collect that data remotely?
These are the types of issues that this task force is going to deal with, but my bottom line point is you do have to have some access to the drone to connect it back to the user. I don't think that's going to be as big of a problem as you may think it is, because in most instances, we've actually seen the drone, we just haven't seen the person operating it.
Thank you very much. Secretary, Administrator, after some of the other participants.
So what can we really do with with technology that we have today? What could we really do to eliminate these near misses, so to speak, and things like that? Well, there's no perfect answer. You know, we could put transponders in drones and that would help them show up on radar. We already know that companies like DJI and 3D Robotics have geofencing and they have limits on altitude and distance from home and all that, but all that's crackable. About the only thing you really could do is if you forced every manufacturer to limit the drone to, let's say, 200, 300, 400 feet, and only allowed those with exemptions or pilot's license or whatever that certification is going to be to actually unlock those restrictions and fly wherever you need to with your COA or your approval. So other than that, there's no perfect answer for this, but we all know that registering all these drones is not going to fix anything. The people who aren't reading the manuals now are going to continue to not read the manuals. Whether their little registration cards registered or not, they're still going to go out and do what they want to do, because people who don't follow rules don't follow rules. Doesn't matter how many you create, they don't follow them. They're going to do what they want anyway, and it's those few bad apples that ruin it for the rest of us. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in. I know it's a little bit different video, but I watched this in its entirety today, and I just had to do some commenting on it. And stick around. We got some more great videos coming up, actual videos, not commentary videos. And we've got our brand new how-to line coming out, instructional videos, professional videos on flying and shooting as a pro. And those will be coming out shortly right here on our YouTube channel at AKRC Guy or AeroWorks Productions on YouTube. Thanks.